just don't have any roadblocks in life. There are no such things as roadblocks.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Over the Wall. Today, I'm joined by Scott McNealy, the co-founder and CEO of Sun Microsystems. And Scott also holds a special place in my heart, as in when I started in 1995, there were a couple of people who I really admired in technology, and that was Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, and Scott McNealy. And when you think of those four and what they did for us today, they built the technologies that are powering the internet. They created the versions of technology that we're building off today. It's pretty extraordinary. So with that, Scott, welcome to the show.
Geez, it sounds like you're, I'm auditioning for 3 Men and a Baby. Putting me in the same category with those other three is a little intimidating for me.
I mean, come on, you were there at the beginning. I mean, Java, all the things that I even brought I wanted to bring this. This was the first computer that I basically built all the code for LivePerson. The original code is still sitting on here, and this is the thing you created. And I think about, like, if you didn't create this, how many of us wouldn't be around? So, like, you got to take the credit, you know. And so I want to ask, first of all, what was it like? I mean, you were in that group. You were part of that amazing group of people and entrepreneurs that just laid like the foundation of what technology leaders should be. So maybe you could just like reminisce a little bit about those days and working, you know, you were fighting Bill Gates and you were out there and partnering with Ellison, but what was it like?
It was crazy and wild. You know, we all owe Steve Jobs for, you know, breaking the age ceiling, because he went out and did it. He was one of the first ever to do it at a young age. And you look at Dell and Zuckerberg and the Google boys and everybody else. Sun Microsystems, we were 4 27-year-olds, and I had 3 years business experience, which was more than the other three founders combined. And I didn't know anything about computers. So we went off and founded a computer company. So he really gave the venture community a chance to take a leap of faith with young and energetic and a bit crazy youth in those days. So that was sort of what it was all about. You know, we moved from Fairchild and National Semiconductor and Intel and all those guys starting the semiconductor revolution. And, you know, we really finally were moving, and there were the disk drive gang with Seagate and others creating the disk drives. So there was a lot of spinning rust and silicon transistors going on. But we hadn't really hit the software era. We hadn't really hit the distributed computing era. IBM was, you know, sending out these clunky mainframes with COBOL, and it was very early days. It was a lot of fun. There were actually orchards in the Silicon Valley, and there weren't a lot of rules.
Just to give a little framing of what you guys created, you know, and what did Sun do, just for the audience who don't know, you know, all the creations and what you guys and your vision back then. Maybe you could just outline it a little bit.
Well, so Sun stands for Stanford University Network Workstation. And, you know, the founding really happened this way. Vinod Khosla and I went to business school together, and I noticed that he was always the last guy at the party. Don't ask me how I noticed that, but we became good buddies. And in fact, we went out and tried to start a company after Stanford Business School. And it ultimately failed pretty quickly. But while we were starting that one, he read about this guy who invented the Stanford University Network and Sun Workstation at Stanford, Andreas von Bechtelsheim, who is what Steve Jobs is to computing in the consumer space. Andy is to computing in the commercial space. I mean, I don't think there's a packet on the internet that at some point doesn't go through some technology designed or invented or created by Andy. And he called Andy up and said, "Your Sun Workstation is perfect for engineering workstations." He had worked at Daisy Systems, which was a CAD workstation company, for a couple of years, and got let go there, and he wanted to go do something different. He said, you know, let's go make your workstation. And Andy said, well, I've licensed it out to 8 people, but none of them can make it, and all the rest of it. So yeah, let's get together. So the three of us And actually, Vinod called me and said, "Hey, when are you quitting your job?" I said, "I'm making 40 grand a year. Why would I quit that?" He was actually working for Onyx, which was the first company to put Unix on a microprocessor. But I was manufacturing manager, and I really didn't know what a disk drive did, but I was pretty good at figuring out how to get stuff through the shop with high quality and debugging stuff and all the rest of it. So anyhow, I said, all right, I'll quit. And I quit. And the three of us got started. We needed a software guy. And we started interviewing Unix folks, eventually ended up in Bill Joy's office up at Berkeley, who had invented Berkeley Unix and really was kind of one of the lead pioneers behind open source software. And we brought him on as kind of the fourth founder, and that was the 427-year-olds. And we were making engineering workstations, and I was doing manufacturing and sales, and I would assemble I would get the packages in at receiving, and I would assemble the shelves, and I wrote in VI a little ERP system on Unix VI to keep track of our inventory and orders and part numbers, and then I would label the boxes and put the boxes up in the shelves and unpack stuff and put the chips in the different. I mean, it was a blast. We were working. Vinod and I were living together.
What was Apple doing at the time?
They were taking off, and Wintel was taking off, and so we weren't going after them. We were going after the engineer. Apple was going after the creative designer, and Microsoft was going after the green eye shade bean counter spreadsheet guy on Lotus 123.
So that's how you were kind of splitting the market, right?
We were run by three engineers and me. So we went after the engineering market, and it was a lot of fun. Apollo was our big competitor. There were only four really big, and I can't even remember all four of them, but there was Computer Vision, Autotrol, Autodesk, not even Autodesk, four CAD CAM products, a couple of UCAD, and Apollo had locked up three of them, and they had 40% of the marketplace. But the big gorilla was Computer Vision, and we were bidding in the first year or so we were out. We were bidding for their workstation business. They had built and manufactured their own, but they were seeing that they were falling behind what Apollo was doing and what their competitors were doing on top of Apollo. And they saw IBM thinking about getting into the workstation business, and they saw PCs. And so we were bidding for some business. This was 2 years into it, and or a year and a half into it. And
how did you guys make money? How did you survive at the beginning?
Well, survive. We were incorporated on February 24th, 1982. We were profitable in May, and July 1st of our first fiscal year, our first full fiscal year, July 1st, we did 8.9 million, 39 million second year. We did 100 million the third year, 215 the fourth year, 500 million the fifth year, and $1 billion the next year. Now that was when the computer industry wasn't so big. So we were profitable right away. We didn't do the Amazon dummies. We should have just lost money for a decade before we went off and did it. But that was back in the old days when I thought you were supposed to make money, and you were supposed to. But we used a lot of cash and raised a lot of money, and the thing took off and went crazy. We had a ball with it. But the story, to finish the Computer Vision, they called us and to answer the phone. We're done. We're going in a different direction. This is purchasing. We're formally cutting off all communications with Sun Microsystems. And he hung up the phone, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "We're done. We're cooked." And I said, "Well, what do we do now?" And he says, "Let's put a crazy proposal." So we invented a workstation that afternoon. We had about 3 hours. We wrote down the specs. We sketched it out. We gave a manufacturer.
What year was this that happened?
Oh my God, it was like within a year or two of starting Sun. So it was 83, I think in 1983. And we sketched out manufacturing rights. We gave them a percentage of the company. We put all our IP in escrow for them. We allowed them to manufacture the whole deal. And we put it in FedEx envelopes, and we FedExed it to 8 different people we knew there. And then Vinod and another engineer hopped on an airplane and red-eyed to Boston, waited in the lobby. Nobody would talk to us. if we lose this, we're done. I mean, they got 80% of the market, and we just do engineering workstations. So finally at noon, somebody comes down and says, "Get out of here. We've read your proposal. It's interesting, but we're going in a different direction. But I can't be seen with you. Go home." So we went home, and about Wednesday of that week, we get a phone call. "Don't say a word. If this leaks out, it's all over. But meet us in Chicago. Bring a contracts lawyer and a printer."
Huh.
So we got in a plane on Saturday. So we flew to O'Hare on Saturday. Monday morning, we announced the deal, and that was the end of it. I think that's an important story for people to understand how, there's a great book called Accidental Empires about startups, and I think every one of them is sort of accidental. And, only Steve Jobs and maybe Dave Duffield with his efforts, Tom Siebel, there's very few of them who can do, that aren't one-trick ponies. Very, very few. Andy Bechtelsheim, he's not a one-trick pony, but these guys, it takes a special amount of talent and grit and stuff to be successful. You need an enormous amount of luck, basically all the time.
But do you think it's really luck, or do you think it's? I think it's persistence, like not quitting and being there for the luck to find you. There's probably times in your history there where you wanted to quit, or there was really tough times.
I didn't want the job of CEO 2 years into it.
Why did you become CEO, by the way? How did they elect you?
2 years into it, they asked Vinod, the current CEO, and the president, who we had hired in from DEC, who wasn't the right guy. They asked both of them to go, and they asked me to take over temporarily. And there's a long, dramatic, and not necessarily important bit of human nature that led to all of that. And I said, "Sure, I'll take it over, but I don't think they want me to manage this place." So they asked my staff, this was February 24th, 1985, 2 years to the day after we started. I took over, and I said, I told the board to go ask my staff if they want me to be CEO, or if they don't, we'll go get a new CEO. I don't really want this job. And so 8-0, the vote came back, let's go find somebody new. So I said, great. So I went and started fixing things. And the day I took over, we had $2 million in revenue per month. We were losing $500,000 per month. And the product had a mean time between failure of about 4 hours for 50% of the product we shipped out there. And that's another long story, but it was a mess. But I just went in there and just started plugging away and fixing things and getting people organized and all the rest of it. And they brought in the new candidate, and we had just closed.
Were you part of the process? Did you obviously?
I did the interviews and stuff, but I felt like I sort of needed to recuse myself because anyhow, during the summer, we closed a handshake deal with Kodak to invest 20% into the company, and they were going to use us in their KIMS and KEEPS. Kodak Electronic Publishing System, and then KIMS was Kodak Information Management System. These were major OEM wins, major, and got us into the business world and all the rest of it. And 20% of the company had an outstanding valuation and all the rest of it. And then I called them up and told them, by the way, we're going to bring this guy in from Hewlett Packard, who was one of their competitors. And I thought nothing of it. And then 2 days later, I got woken up at 6 a.m. in my bed. The phone rings, and it's Kodak. And they said, this is Kodak. We are withdrawing our investment offer. We are canceling our contracts with you. And we're no longer going to be working with you. Click.
You're kidding me.
I'm getting tired of these calls. I go, did I really hear that? And I'm showering and I'm rushing into the office and I'm calling everybody and going. So I call the guys back and I go, what's going on? And they go, we hate that guy you're bringing in as CEO. We know him, we hate him, he's a disaster. So I said, can we talk about this? And they said, yeah. So they sent out a guy named Dick Kleinhans, who was their chief operations guy. Crusty little guy, sort of like Mr. Magoo, nicest guy, toughest guy. I love the guy immediately. And he goes and interviews everybody. And they all 11 of my staff came back and said to him 11-0, we'd rather have Scott than this other guy. And he comes in and he sits me down and he goes, Scott, you need to, I can't even use the words he used, like grow some anatomy, he said. He said, you need to step up, sack up, go get it done, take over, you be the boss. He said, I'm going to go in and tell your board, we'll do the investment, we'll do the contract, but we want a 5-year veto vote on you being CEO.
Wow.
You are CEO for the next 5 years unless we agree on the next CEO.
Wow.
And I said, can I think about this for a day? I went out to dinner with my mom. I said, Mom, I saw my dad do this executive thing. He worked too hard. I always thought I'd be a good number 2, not the leader, all the rest of it. I know that's too hard. I just, really, Mom, what do you think? She says, do it. She says, do it for a year and then you can always step down later. So I thought about it, I came in and I said, all right, I'll try. But I handed the board a written resignation letter, signed. And I gave it to the chairman at the time, and I said, you can fire me anytime you want. I'll help you bring on somebody new, because the previous transition hadn't been very
smooth.
It was emotional. And finally, after 20 plus years in the pinata, I said, I've got a boys 2, 4, 6, and 8 at home. And I finally figured the CEO thing out, but I really, it's time for me to move on and spend a little more time with my kids. Those are my 4 new startups. And so that's sort of how I became CEO, and I learned on the job, and I had some really great people, especially HR people who through the years really trained me and kept me in line. And Carol Bartz hauled me aside and immediately said, we're going to go shopping for suits. And this first day I got on the job. And so we went and we bought 2 suits. I think I still got them.
Well, when so you take over as CEO, you said it was 22 years, right? Or it was 22 or 20?
I don't, it was a long time.
2022. But I guess I'll ask you a couple questions about that, because you're learning on the job, right? And you're building a company that's moving very quick. And I think, how do you fly the plane and on your personal self and change the engine, to better yourself? What kind of tools, what did you have to do if you could share that?
I think people write these books, how to be successful. You look at the personalities of an Elon Musk, of a Bill Gates, of a Larry Ellison, of Dave Duffield, myself. We're all incredibly different. We have and Steve Jobs, all very, very different styles and perspectives and personalities and aptitudes and all the rest of it. And I really think your management style sort of has to reflect who you are. The last thing Steve Jobs needed to do was get consensus.
Right.
My goodness, if we all,
But how do you figure that out? Because that's a great point. Because people are reading books and they got boards of directors.
A lot of people think they know their style. They go in with a superiority complex and they're dead wrong. And we never hear about them. I had a lot of good, smart people. Without Bill Joy and Andy and Vinod getting it started and pointed in the right direction, and without all the great engineers we hired, I had really great VPs of HR, Crawford Beveridge and Bill McGowan. These guys were like rock stars, and they really, I was 29 when I took over, and all these guys were 35, 40, 45, 50, 55 years old, and they'd all had wisdom, and somehow they all decided they would put up with my whatever. But I had a magic management. Since I didn't know what I was doing, I spent my entire career, and I finished my career asking people, if you were CEO, what would you do differently than what I'm doing?
That's a great.
And I would listen. And I don't think anywhere near enough people who, unless you are Steve Jobs, or Larry Ellison is super smart. Some of these very, very smart guys can get away with it, but for those of us who are just like okay smart, you can't beat mankind's wisdom. And so I spent a whole career trying to harness that global wisdom of all of my employees, all of my partners, all of my customers, all of my board members, all of my investors, all the rest of it. I didn't buy everything everybody told me. and I learned to trust my logic and my intuition and my gut. It takes time to trust your gut. At least it did for me. I had this inferiority. What am I doing? I didn't know what a disk drive was a year before we started Sun. And, I'm around all these smart people. But I also learned, having gone to Cranbrook School and Harvard College and Stanford Business School, the one thing I did learn, and the only thing I probably learned, is I learned to be very comfortable around people who were way smarter than me. And I learned to appreciate them. I learned to enjoy them. I wasn't intimidated by them. And I was very happy to listen to their ideas. And over time, I learned to figure out, there's a difference between intelligence and smart. And I might have been around a really intelligent person who had a really dumb idea. And so over time, you just develop your gut feel that way. And I know the day I stepped down, I told my wife, I said, holy mackerel, I finally figured this job out. And I'm kind of stepping back. But, I've been more than busy trying to impart some early on wisdom to my kids, and doing my advisory work and working on Curriki. I'm doing my give back with Curriki, which I'm using what I learned watching that movie to try and create a better way to do education, using open source, GitHub, using software, using the cloud, using community building, using technology to build technology. We did Java Studio, now we're doing Curriki Studio. I'm having an absolute ball with it. I don't have any customers that are paying me money and therefore yelling at me because I didn't deliver. Everything I bring them, they're all happy because they got it for nothing. So I'm having a ball, and we're trying to fix a really, really broken thing. So, it's just different.
When I wanted to ask you about that before I go there, you said something about asking people, what would you do if you were CEO, which I think is a great piece.
That's the golden rule for anybody.
Okay, so do you remember, is there something someone once said to you that you were sort of surprised by, obviously, and you thought, whoa, I didn't see it, but they did, and I got to make that's a major shift I got to make or something? Or do you remember anything that came apart from when you asked that question?
We had, I don't know. It was just something I did every day, and it didn't, all of the good ideas.
But I don't think you walked around every day. Did you really go around every day?
No, I did.
Hey, could you tell me what you would do if I'm here?
I would do that at town halls. I would do that in one-on-ones. I would do that with customers. Every customer meeting, I'd say, how are we treating you? And what should we be doing that we aren't doing? You go ask my sales guys. And you let the customer talk about those two things. And then selling got really easy. They gave you all the clues about how to sell. But, we got good ideas from any and everybody all over the map. I'm afraid I wasn't very original, but I was a great thief of good ideas. And so I'm not ashamed of that. I think that's a talent.
And when you think about then the flip side of that, because you've been around so long and you've seen so many different people succeed and fail. You've seen like the Steve Jobs, and obviously you knew Steve Jobs probably pretty well and spent time with him. But on the flip side, you probably saw people who had a lot of potential, but they made some mistakes. They didn't do things, and they were entrepreneurs. What sort of like the killer things on that side that you've seen that people should be aware of?
I think the make-buy decision is the most important decision CEOs can make, and I don't mean that just in the hardware sense, but what software do you write versus what software do you steal from the open source world, or what software do you OEM from somebody, or what software do you use in your internal operations? And I think the toughest calls for CEOs are people who focus on a customer, figure out what matters to them, and buy everything else. You build what matters to the customer, whatever the customer faces or cares about. And what got Sun in more trouble than anything we did is we too vertically integrated. We bought too much real estate. We hired too many sales reps. We didn't use the reseller channel enough. We didn't get to the cloud soon enough. There were a whole bunch of things that we did.
I remember I saw an interview where you were like kind of pointing out that Bill Gates kind of stole everything. And didn't really build anything original. and you were kind of like, they were using, obviously this during when the antitrust was going on, they were using the power of their balance sheet to kind of be anti-competitive. And you looked at it like, that's not fair. And we're builders. He should just build. So it sounds like you didn't.
I didn't say it wasn't fair. Everything's fair in life. Now, what's legal, according to the rules that we saw, bundling, what he did, took out, Lotus, because what he would do is it was a genius move. It was brilliant. I got Windows and I got Office and I need a word processor.
Yeah.
And he'd go out and look at the top 8 word processors, interview them, and he'd go to the best one and he'd say, listen, I'm going to either buy you for this amount of money or I'm going to buy your competitor. I'm going to bundle that into Office and you're done. So either take my offer or I'm going to the guy next door. And what does the guy do? He takes a below what he had hoped for offer, but that was the best offer there. But he was using his bundling powers. Now we didn't go after him for bundling. Europe did, his competitors did, who got bundled out of the business. There's nothing unfair about it unless it's illegal. And you got to look at the antitrust rules and look at bundling and collusion and all the other ways you can get sideways with the FTC, the DOJ, or the Sherman Antitrust Act, or all the rest of it. So it wasn't unfair. He got away with it. Apparently, it was fair. We went after him for changing Java and using Java and subsetting it and supersetting it. It was I think the largest antitrust deal to this date that's ever been settled. But the courts were obviously indicating that might not be legal what he had done. So he settled.
Did you ever? Obviously, you met him. Are you friendly with him? Did you make peace with him, or is it?
I'm at peace. I don't think he is, because I tend to have fun and I enjoyed. I grew up playing hockey. You sniped and jabbed and gave all kinds of verbal barbs. It's just part of the. It was always fun in a hockey game to see who could come up with the most clever quip. And your team would laugh and get them all fired. The other team would get mad and come at you and try and hit you and hopefully go to the penalty box. And it was just sort of part of the game. And I just thought that's part of competition. And then after, we all went out and drank beer together.
Yeah.
That was the deal. The Balmer and Butthead and, look out instead of outlook and hairball and, all the other quips. I didn't have his ad budget. I had to be funny and quotable, and he knew that. He's probably still bitter. I don't know. He doesn't. He's up here. I'm over here doing podcasts.
I'll have him on here one time and ask him. You guys were well, you're right. The chip guys, and then hardware, as in yeah, exactly. And then there's you guys starting the software industry, the packaged software industry, and then you had hardware with it. And then there's my generation, which is like generation 1 of the internet. Then you've got Google and Facebook and
they're kind of computers and the components, and then there was systems with storage and servers all put together. Yeah. And then there were desktops and servers and then mini computers and all the rest of it. And then we got into operating systems, became a real thing, and there were multiple operating systems out there. Apple, really kind of solidified it with OS, and then there was Unix and then Linux. But then there became the apps, and we were shrink wrapped, and then all of a sudden we were an icon on your phone or PC or laptop or whatever. And then came the internet era, where all of a sudden they became, it was Andreessen. I remember the meeting we met with Andreessen, and we brought the Java virtual machine over, and we moved the Netscape browser with the Java virtual machine, and boom, all of a sudden there were 100 million downloads in the blink of an eye, and all of a sudden the interactive internet was made. They created the internet, we created the interactivity with executables in the browser, and that changed everything.
Yeah, I remember we were writing in I think C++, and then we went to Java. All those servers and everything went to Java. So I just to turn on another topic here. The name of the podcast is Over the Wall, and I guess, one of the things we always talk about is that we face these walls in life, in business, and then we have to do things to get over them. And being an entrepreneur is hard, and you hit walls all the time. So, what have you done? Where have you experienced it, and what did you do to get over it?
From day one, I just never didn't work as hard as I could all day long. From the time I was a kid, I mean, even in the summers, I'd literally get up, walk 18 holes of golf, come in, swim a 2-mile swim practice, jump onto the sailboat, do two hours of sailboat practice, run over to the tennis court, play 2 hours of tennis. My mom would pick me up. I'd get dressed into a baseball uniform, and I'd play a game of baseball, and then I'd go home and have dinner and eat a bowl of ice cream and fall asleep in front of the TV. I've always done that. And so I've never really felt like there was a wall. I never really, that's how I worked. That's how I played. That's how I competed. That's how I don't know. That's just how I live my life. And so
you never faced anything that was like, okay, this is going to be, to get through, or does it just seem like it was like a pretty smooth journey?
It's never smooth. I mean, I hunt down problems. My wife says, can't you just enjoy it? Do you always have to see what's wrong with everything? And I go, well, yeah, I suppose I could, but I can't help but comment on somebody who just can't park their car in the slot, or what were they thinking, or whatever. And that's just the way I am, and I want to fix things. And I don't know, I just don't have any roadblocks in life. There are no such things as roadblocks.
Gotcha. So you basically have a mental attitude. There's not roadblocks. There's just problems in life, and I need to fix them. It's like, right. I'm not going to make any more of it and be like all wrapped in my head about it. I'm just going to fix problems. Life is a set of problems, and I'm fixing them. Don't get all flustered by it.
Yeah, I tend to go where the problems are, like Kuricki. I could say, hey, education is really dork, and it is.
So what are you hoping to do with your school? What do you want to do?
All parents should be given choice of where they can buy that education with vouchers. So the one little piece I'm trying to fix is to give us better authoring tools for remote learning, and that's what Kuricki's all about. Java Studio created internet apps. Adobe creates PDFs. PowerPoint creates presentations. Kuricki Studio creates active learning experiences with no programming required. We do all the hard work for you. You just bring the audio, video, text, and images, put it into your presentation. We scope and sequence it, activate it, pass back to the grade book. One button pushing to the learning management. It's enormous amount of technology, and it's all free and open source.
So what do you have? What's your hope with that? If you can snap your finger.
My hope is that the market tips in a big way to using the whole Kuricki API, the whole Kuricki platform. It's all free and open, and that we all have common 3D architectures, common video sharing, and shared whiteboards and shared stylus. We have common grade books and passbacks, and common learning management and content management systems. We have a common way of doing all this. So the market tipped to PowerPoint, right? If you're going to do a presentation, you do PowerPoint. And if you're going to do an active learning experience, whether it's lifelong learning, K-12, college, or the trades, or even if you want to create an advertisement, what is advertising and marketing? It's educating your customer. Why not do a virtual tour of the Ford Mustang and walk them through that and have people say, oh, here's what I like. This is the color, I really like this or that. And ask them about why do we have this, that, and they learn all about it. And then at the end of it, you give them a test score. Hey, you've earned a 5% discount on a new Ford Mustang. Here's a dealer, go see him. You not only learned about the car, people who love cars would love to take it and learn all about it and see how the engine works, see how the suspension works, see how it compares, and get tested on it and then win a coupon. That's a remote learning experience rather than watching a 30-second video ad of some, Barbie and Ken driving around fast on a California curve where you're leaning back, falling asleep and saying, that's not me.
So the hope is remote learning. Are you thinking remote learning for everyone?
Remote, active, lean forward, not lean back. Billboards, print ads, TV ads, or even the thing that's running in the corner of your web page that you're trying to ignore. We want to get engaging content to learn about. Think about all the hours we spend on Minecraft and what's the other one with M? I don't know. There's all these games that everybody's playing now. And then think about all of the bingeable garbage you get on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like I did it.
Yeah.
I watched the whole Tiger King at the beginning of the lockdown. I thought we were all going to die. And I thought, well, let's just do it. But those wasted hours, instead of climbing the leaderboard on learning all of these, we're creating an achievement portfolio, a software achievement portfolio that's your own little transcript bank. So from the time you're 3 to gray, every time you do a Curriki app, you can download all of the results, verified, authenticated into your own little, the company doesn't own it, the school doesn't own it, the testing, you own your transcript, and you can decide who to share it with when you want to, get some kudos. And so now, instead of doing these video games, you're building your
you're building your knowledge. You're building your
knowledge, and you're proving it, and you'll have that proof that you can take.
But it feels like universities. I mean, when I went to school, which is in the 80s, you had to go to a centralized place to get the books, first of all, because they had the libraries, right? Because there was no internet when I went. It just started. It was a very limited system. And then the experts were there too. They weren't online, so you had to go get the experts in a university. Where today, you can get experts online, and you can obviously tap the world's knowledge. So
we want to attack that half. And that's reading, writing, arithmetic, and languages, history, all of that stuff you can learn on your own, self-paced, on demand, and you can rip along. Maybe you learn music that way. But there are things you need to do in a social and collaborative and shared environment that you can't do virtually. And so I think most of what you do in the classroom today can be done on the notebook. But you still have to go to school. It becomes more of a YMYWCA, where you have athletics, performing arts, visual arts, labs, you have debate clubs and science projects, and even recess and lunch. Those are all integral parts of growing up as a kid and going to school. We still need to do those, but sitting in quietly in a row while kids are throwing spitballs and starting fights and all the rest of it, you don't need that. You can do all of that much better, I think, with really well done Curriki curated, created, and distributed content. At least that's my hope. And then we can turn the campus into what it ought to be, a community and socialization and
connection,
civilizing place.
We had this gentleman on the podcast, Anthony Dorio, who was one of the founders of Ethereum. So Anthony's one of the founders of Ethereum. And there's this, we were talking about this, the future of distributed organizations and also self-sovereign identity, as in people are like on the blockchain technology, you see they're part of a community, but they're very independent and they're learning online. They're very young people, obviously create a lot of wealth for themselves. I mean, Anthony's a billionaire. You would never know it. He was at the beginning 10 years ago on blockchain and then with Ethereum. But the concept we were talking about is that there won't be a central corpse. It's distributed people working in a community to build the technology together. They get something out of it. They get coin potentially, but they get self-sovereignty. And so it seems like this fits with that idea that you can educate yourself anywhere, you can live anywhere, you can be independent. But I think what you're trying to do with Curriki is it sort of fits this idea, because I think of my kids, I've got young kids, 4-year-old, 3-year-old, and a newborn. And I don't think they're going to be going to colleges and universities like I did.
In the historical blink of an eye, in the evolutionary blink of an eye, we have gone from 25 years average life experience to 78, 80, or whatever we're at, life expectancy. But what that tells me is that the hormones and the energy and all the rest of it, we peak from the time we're 13 to 24, and then we're sort of over the hill. And you look at all of the great athletes, all, the Tiger Woodses and the gymnasts and the swimmers, and you look at all of the great entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and they're all starting mostly as teenagers. They're starting their whole entrepreneurial thing. I started late. I was 27, and that's why I'm doing podcasts again. So you look at this, and you look at artists, you look at mathematicians, we don't have the family responsibilities. We aren't clouded by previous experience. Ignorance is bliss from that perspective. And we have all of this testosterone or estrogen or whatever it is we have when we're young, and we go like heck, and we don't know any better. And we just go invent a new and a better world. And the worst thing we can do is lock kids up in a high school classroom and then take them 4 years to college and delay the best years destroy the best years of their lives. We're hurting ourselves with the current structure. So what you're talking about, I think, is the only way out. And, if I were to do it again, I got in, my kids were just a little too early for me to get there with them, but I tried to convince all of them not to go to college.
Wow.
Not one college is ever committed to making any child a higher IQ.
But there's a discussion about it's a brand. Basically, you were at Stanford, Harvard, and you get these. Look, that's what it'll end up becoming.
It's an $8 shirt with a $90 alligator on it.
That's what it is. So we're coming to the top of the hour, and I've asked everybody about there's this gremlin that people have in their head, and it's this voice that a lot of times entrepreneurs and people, just everyone, you have to beat the voice, and the voice is not telling you to do good things. Sometimes giving you a lot of doubt. I'm just curious if you have this voice in your head.
The voice I have in my head is, when you put your head down to go to sleep tonight, are you going to sleep well if you do this or if you don't do this? And I don't need anybody else's approval except my 4 boys and my wife. That's the only approval I need in life. And, they can cut me down really hard and fast. Just basically nobody else can. Because in my heart, I know I'm out there doing really good things. I've done really well. I didn't cheat. There hasn't been one scandal in the history of Sun Microsystems. There was, it was just a whole bunch of people kicking butt, having fun. I earned my money the right way, and we shared all of our APIs and technology in a way nobody else did, and we helped create and move the ball forward as openly as we did. So I feel good about what we did. We made a lot of mistakes. I'm okay with that. I made more mistakes than most people have made decisions. So the only thing is, at night I lay down and say, did you do the best you could with this day? Because I'm getting to that age where I understand, you don't always get another day.
Gotcha. Yeah. You gotta be able to go to bed at night with a clear mind, I guess.
I sleep well, except for parts of my body that hurt.
And then my last question is, if you could give the viewers an important nugget of advice, building a company, starting young, what would you impart on them?
Yeah, don't be surprised if people think you have a bad idea. And if everybody thinks you have a good idea, then everybody's going to do it. If everybody does it, you have no differentiation. If you have no differentiation, no pricing power, no profits, no investment, you're out of business. So be not afraid of the controversial strategy or the direction or the approach. There's a minor problem with being controversial, is if you're wrong, you look really stupid, but don't worry about that. Just use somebody else's money for the first one.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for your time. As I said, you were inspiring to me. I'm the first generation of the internet entrepreneurs, and I'll leave one story for you is that it was 2000, end of 2000, and the internet was imploding, as you know, and 2001 started pretty bad. And I read something or heard you say that hope is not a strategy. And I kept saying the word, I hope I can raise more money. I hope, I had that in my head, and we were burning like $2 million a month. We had like 20 million in cash. We were burning through it. And I remember when I heard, I hope it's not a strategy. I went home, I came back, and I changed everything I was thinking about the company. I restructured it. But because of those words, because of your leadership, I know my company's here today. I just took your words to heart, and I said, you had a way of running a business that I would like to follow. It's going to sleep at night, clear mind, not running it straight. Whether you win or lose, you did it fairly, but you imparted a lot on us. Like I said, Jobs, Gates, Ellison, and McNealy. These are the people who allowed us, the next generation, to prosper. And I thank you for all of us and for myself.
Well, flattered to be on your show, flattered to be mentioned in that company, and flattered to have a chance to share with anybody. And everybody check out www.curriki.org, CURRIKI.org. I'd appreciate your help in moving that ball forward.
Let's do it. Let's help them out.
Thanks, buddy. See you time.
Thanks.
Take care.